Ever felt like you're the one holding your family together, giving everything you have, but deep down you know they'd probably be fine without you? It stings, right? But what if I told you that loyalty to family might just cost you more than you think, and sometimes it's not worth the sacrifice? It's hard to face, but loyalty to family sometimes comes with a price. And more often than not, it's a price you don't even realize you're paying. In this video, we're diving into something a lot of people don't want to talk about: what happens when you give and give and give. But instead of love and appreciation, all you get is more demands? When family stops caring and starts taking. I've been there. You're always the one who shows up, always. The one who fixes things. But no one shows up for you when you need them. Stick with me till the end, because I'm going to show you how setting boundaries with your family might just be the best thing you can do for yourself, and how it could be the game changer you didn't know you needed. Lena Carter had always been the one everyone could count on, the emotional backbone, the problem solver, the bank. At 32, she had shaped her entire life around being the person who gave, who fixed things for her family. But what happens when the person who's always there finally breaks? It wasn't gradual. One day, everything just collapsed. Lena was working late as usual when her body hit a breaking point. She didn't see it coming, just the sudden dizziness, her chest tightening, and then nothing. The doctors said it was exhaustion, stress, and a lack of self-care, years of pushing herself to the limit without ever stopping to breathe. When Lena woke up in that sterile white hospital room, everything felt off. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound, a reminder of the fragile line between life and collapse. The room felt hollow, like the silence was pressing in on her from all sides, making her feel smaller. With each passing second, she waited for a call, a text, a visit, anything. But the minutes stretched into hours, and still nothing. Then her phone buzzed. A message. Her sister, Marissa, tagged her in a photo. A perfect family moment. Everyone smiling, laughing, carefree. The caption read, "Family Day without the drama." The photo loaded slowly, and with every like that flashed on her screen, Lena felt herself fading away just a little more. There they were, living their perfect, effortless lives, while she was tethered to a hospital bed alone. In that moment, Lena realized something that had been hiding in plain sight for years. They didn't need her the way she thought they did. For so long, she'd thought that the more she gave, the more they'd care. That the emotional support, the financial help, the endless hours of listening would be enough to keep the family bond strong. But all she saw now was a transaction: her love, her sacrifices treated as a given. And in return, they gave her nothing but expectations. Her father, Robert, never asked how she was doing, only how much money he could borrow. Her mother, Elena, never acknowledged the emotional toll on Lena as long as Lena continued to carry the weight of the household. Marissa, always starting another business venture, always turning to Lena to bail her out financially. Peyton, the youngest, quietly borrowing money for school and life, only to forget about the loans when they were paid off. For years, Lena had been the silent enabler, thinking that her sacrifices were acts of love. But the truth stung harder than they didn't need her the way she thought they did. Hospital beds, cold, sterile. Sheets, love was never the currency they valued. And now, as Lena stared at the smiling faces of her family, she knew one thing for certain: it was time to stop giving without ever receiving. Lena had always believed that loyalty was the ultimate form of love. She gave everything she had to her family: her time, her money, her emotional energy, thinking that by always being there, she was proving how much she cared. But as she sat in that hospital room, staring at her phone, it hit her. Her family didn't see her the way she thought they did. They didn't see her as the person they loved and cared for. They saw her as a lifeline, a resource. And that was the cost of her loyalty. For years, Lena had thought that if she just kept giving, kept fixing their problems, they would appreciate her. She thought they would see how hard she worked to make sure they were okay. But now, looking at that family photo, she realized the truth. The more she gave, the less they valued her. It wasn't just financial help. It wasn't just emotional labor. Lena had become the fixer in her family, the one they all turned to when they needed something. She gave money to pay off bills, she listened for hours when her family needed advice, and she covered her sister's mistakes again and again. It was always her. And yet, when she needed them most, when her body gave out and she was alone in the hospital, not a single one of them thought to check in on her. Her father, Robert, had been out of work for years, relying on her to keep the family afloat. Her mother, Elena, quietly let it happen, never questioning Robert's lack of effort, always asking Lena to pick up the slack. Her sisters, Marissa and Peyton, each had their own issues. Marissa, constantly launching and failing in her business ventures, always came to Lena for financial support. Peyton, who quietly borrowed money and never really gave anything back, leaned on Lena as though her generosity was just a given. Lena had spent years thinking that her constant giving was a form of love, that the more she gave, the more they would love her in return. But that wasn't what was happening. Instead, her sacrifices had become an expectation. And it was in that hospital room, staring at a photo of her family laughing without her, that she realized just how deeply her loyalty had been taken for granted. This wasn't love anymore. It wasn't about caring for each other, it was about using her. And that realization cut deeper than any physical pain she was feeling. So why does this matter? Because this is the hidden cost of loyalty. When you give too much and expect nothing in return, you slowly start to lose yourself. You stop being a person to others and become a tool they use to keep their lives intact. And when you're the one who always gives, you can end up feeling invisible, like your value is only tied to what you do for others. It's a hard truth to swallow, but Lena knew something had to change. She could no longer be the one who gave without ever receiving, who carried everyone else's burden while her own was ignored. She had to break free from the cycle of being the family's emotional and financial fixer. And that's the cost of loyalty, when the love you give isn't returned, when the people who should be there for you are too busy taking to even notice you're struggling. In that moment, Lena knew she had to stop. Because the real love she needed wasn't from giving it, was from learning to say no, from setting boundaries, and from finally taking care of herself. Lena had always prided herself on being the dependable one, the one who could always be counted on. But as the days passed since her collapse and the shock of it all started to settle in, something inside her shifted. She began to see her family not through the lens of love or loyalty, but through the cold, hard reality of what they were really asking of her. Her role wasn't love, it was obligation. They didn't need her because they cared. They needed her because she was the one who always made things happen, the one who kept the wheels turning when they slowed down. And the more she thought about it, the more it became clear. Her family wasn't just relying on her out of necessity, they were taking advantage of her. They had all gotten so used to her being the fixer, the helper, the emotional bank, that they no longer saw Lena as a person. They saw her as the resource that kept their world intact. Let's take a look at them. Robert, her father, always behind on bills, always needing her to cover expenses, even though he hadn't worked a full-time job in years. He'd call, asking for money, and she'd send it without hesitation. But when was the last time he checked on her? When was the last time he asked how she was doing, emotionally or physically? When did he stop being a father and start being a dependent? Lena had never seen it until now, but the truth was undeniable. Robert didn't just rely on her for financial help. He relied on her to feel okay about his own shortcomings. Elena, Her mother, Elena, ever the optimist, always told Lena that Robert would figure it out. But deep down, Lena knew the truth. Elena wasn't just being supportive, she was being complacent. She let Lena carry the emotional weight of their family because it was easier than confronting Robert's failures. Lena's mother never asked for help, never tried to fix the situation. She just quietly let Lena take care of it. And because Lena did it all, Elena could keep pretending everything was fine. Lena realized her mom wasn't just emotionally absent. She was actively enabling Robert's behavior by relying on Lena to clean up the mess. Marissa, her younger sister Marissa, was the free spirit, the entrepreneur who was always chasing the next big idea. A wellness brand here, a podcast there, a candle business that never took off. And every time one of her ventures failed, Marissa turned to Lena for help, asking her to pay for things she couldn't afford. "I'll pay you back next month," she'd say. But the month would pass, and so would the next one, and the next. Marissa's help was always conditional, always with strings attached. But what hurt Lena the most was the realization that Marissa didn't just depend on her for money. She was using her to maintain the facade of success without ever facing the consequences of her own failures. Peyton, her youngest sister, Peyton, was different. She didn't ask directly for money, but Lena always found herself picking up the slack. The small loans for school, the borrowed clothes and gadgets that never got returned, the promises Peyton never kept. Peyton didn't ask for help, but she expected it. And Lena was always there to give, because she didn't want to disappoint anyone. But in hindsight, she saw that Peyton had never truly needed her. She just expected Lena to be the person who picked up the pieces when things didn't go as planned. The more Lena reflected, the clearer it became. Her family wasn't just depending on her, they were taking from her. They didn't see her as a person with needs and desires of her own. They saw her as someone who would never say no, someone who would always show up and fix things. And she did because she thought that was her role. But now, she saw it for what it really was, a one-sided relationship. They took and took, but never gave back. They drained her emotionally, financially, and mentally. Lena couldn't keep doing it. She couldn't keep being the one who carried their weight while hers was being ignored. She was tired of being the lifeline for people who were perfectly content to let her drown, as long as they didn't have to face the truth. But what hurt them most was realizing that they didn't even realize it. They didn't see Lena's sacrifices for what they truly were: acts of love, yes, but also acts of self-sabotage. She had let them mold her into something she wasn't. She had let their dependence on her become her identity. And it had cost her everything. Now, the question wasn't if they would change, it was if she could change. If she could finally start saying no, setting boundaries, and stepping back from being the family's emotional and financial support. The question was, could she start living for herself without feeling guilty? Lena didn't know the answer yet, but one thing was for sure: she was done being the one who always gave. It was time to take control. Lena had always told herself that loyalty to family was her highest calling. She believed that by giving everything she had, her time, her money, her energy, she was showing them just how much she loved them. But in that hospital bed, the hard truth began to settle in. Her family didn't need her in the way she thought. They needed a resource, a fixer. They had learned to depend on her without ever thinking about what it cost her. For the first time, Lena wasn't concerned about anyone else. It wasn't about Marissa's failed businesses or Robert's financial struggles. It wasn't about Peyton's unspoken demands. It was about her, about finally choosing herself. And that felt terrifying. The guilt hit Lena like a wave. She could almost hear Marissa's voice, the familiar tone of manipulation. "Please, Lena, I really need you this time. I promise I'll pay you back next month." It was the same script, the same promises. But this time, Lena stood firm. Her heart raced, and her hands trembled slightly, but she reminded herself, "This is for me. I'm allowed to say no. The old patterns felt so ingrained, so automatic. But this time, Lena wasn't going to let guilt make her decisions. The phone call with Marissa ended with a quiet click, and Lena sat there, still, heart pounding. For a brief moment, she expected a wave of regret, but it didn't come. What filled the space instead was something unexpected: pride. A quiet, steady pride. She had set her first boundary. It wasn't easy, but it was a victory. Then came Robert's call. Lena, I need some money. The bills are piling up, and I don't know what to do. His voice was shaky with the same old helplessness that had always pushed her to act. She heard it in his tone, the subtle expectation that she would fix things. She almost caved. She felt the familiar tug of responsibility, the old urge to help. But something inside her held steady. She couldn't keep doing it. No, Dad. I can't help this time. For a moment, there was silence on the other end of the line. Lena's heart skipped a beat. But instead of feeling guilty, instead of second-guessing herself, she felt something shift. She wasn't the fixer anymore. She was Lena. And Lena had a right to live her own life, to make her own choices. When she hung up the phone, Lena didn't feel the usual rush of regret. Instead, there was a quiet pride, a feeling she hadn't had in years. She was still Lena. She was still enough. She wasn't just the one who bailed everyone out. She was a woman who could stand up for herself and say no, without apologizing for it. Her mind wandered back to Grandpa Joe, his calm, steady presence. The moment she had called him, expecting his usual wisdom, but this time he said something that resonated deeper than ever before. You've been drowning for too long, Lena, he had said. It's time to swim on your own. Let them figure it out for once. You've carried them all for so long. It's time to put yourself first. And you can't pour from an empty cup. Grandpa Joe's words felt like a balm to her rattled mind. It wasn't just about taking a break, it was about stepping back and reclaiming her life. He was right. Lena had spent so long drowning in everyone else's problems that she had forgotten how to breathe on her own. And for the first time, she took a breath. Lena had expected the fallout. After all, when you've spent years enabling people, setting boundaries doesn't come without consequences. But nothing could have prepared her for the wave of guilt and anger that came. Next, it started with a text from Marissa. You've changed. This isn't the sister I know. Lena's fingers hovered over the screen, but she didn't reply. There was no point in engaging in the same old guilt trip. She had said no, and that was it. Then came the phone calls. Robert, in his usual panic, asking if she was sure she couldn't help. Peyton sent a few messages, asking if they could talk, her words softer, more passive. But Lena stayed firm, each no feeling more empowering than the last. Her family didn't know how to handle this version of her. The version that wasn't just a lifeline, the version that wasn't there to fix their mistakes or carry their weight. But the hardest part wasn't the calls or the texts, it was the way they tried to make her feel guilty for her decision. Her mother, Elena, called and asked in the most concerned tone she could muster, "Why are you doing this? We've always helped each other out." It stung. Her mother, who had watched Lena shoulder the burden for years without lifting a finger, was suddenly acting like it was a betrayal. Lena felt the familiar pull of guilt. She thought about how many times she'd said yes to her mother's demands, how many times she'd covered for Robert and Marissa. She thought about the family dinners where everything looked perfect on the outside, everyone smiling, everyone pretending that nothing was wrong. But something inside her had shifted. She wasn't going to let them manipulate her emotions anymore. When Robert called one last time, his voice strained and desperate, Lena felt a wave of frustration wash over her. She knew what he wanted money, but she wasn't going to be his safety net anymore. Dad, I can't keep doing this. I've given you everything. I have. There was a long silence. For a moment, she thought he might finally understand. But then he said in a voice filled with frustration, "You'll regret this, Lena. You're breaking up the family." That was the moment it hit her. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about their expectations of her. And as much as they wanted to pull her back into the old role of being the fixer, she knew it wasn't her responsibility to keep them together anymore. For the first time, Lena didn't feel the crushing weight of guilt. Instead, she felt relief. It wasn't just about saying no, it was about saying yes to herself. She wasn't going to let their drama control her life anymore. She had taken back her power, and that in itself was a victory. The days that followed Lena's decision were quieter, almost surreal. For the first time in years, there was peace in her mind. No more phone calls from Robert, no more constant demands from Marissa, no more worrying about what everyone else needed from her. It wasn't easy, but it was starting to feel right. Lena took the time to reconnect with herself. She spent her evenings doing things that made her feel alive again, reading books she hadn't touched in years, taking long walks, and just sitting in silence, feeling like she could finally breathe. She didn't feel the need to explain herself to anyone anymore. For the first time, she realized that her peace wasn't up for negotiation. It wasn't about being the family's savior, it was about being the person she had neglected for so long. She was allowed to exist for herself. One evening, she sat down at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, feeling a deep sense of calm settle over her. There were no texts, no calls, no emergencies to fix. Just silence, and it was beautiful. Lena knew her family might never understand, but that was not longer her problem. They had to find their own way, and she had to find hers. She was finally free. For the first time in a long time, Lena wasn't just the fixer. She wasn't the one who had to make everything right. She was Lena, a woman who deserved to live her life on her own terms. A woman who had the right to say no without guilt. A woman who could finally start thinking about her own happiness instead of always worrying about everyone else's. The freedom she felt wasn't just about stopping the constant cycle of giving, it was about choosing herself for the first time in years. Lena had learned something important through this whole journey. True loyalty isn't about giving until you have nothing left. It's about setting boundaries, knowing when to step back, and realizing that taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. She didn't have to be the one who always fixes things. And, for the first time in years, she didn't feel guilty about it. She was finally living for herself. She was enough just as she was. If you've ever felt like you're always the one giving, always the one carrying the weight of your family's problems, I hope Lena's story helps you realize that it's okay to say no. It's okay to put yourself first. You deserve to have a life that's just yours. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time,